Hey guys, Wolfie here. This is a video log for the channel. With that out of the way, the topic being the graphics card situation. Now, there's a lot of he said, she said, like what's going on with the supply, when it's going to end, so on and so forth. So with all that out of the way, the exact topic within it is 10 reasons why the shortage won't go away, and 10 possible solutions to get it under control. Now, with each side, why the problem won't go away and the possible solution, I will add in an additional factor as a sort of an honorable mention. So it's a grand total of 11 reasons why the shortage won't go away for graphics cards, and 11 possible solutions. So before I get into the meat of the video, any opinion in this one is mine and mine alone. Now, before I get into some of the exact reasons, a little bit more detail. So, what I'm going to be doing here to make things more clear, I'm going to have quite a few links in the description below, so that way you guys can read some of this on your own time. Now, there are going to be some exceptions still to links because some of it comes straight from my email, so I just don't feel at all comfortable providing certain things tied to my email, so just bear with me. Now, one of the reasons why I don't feel that the graphics card shortage will ever go away, and my list is in my list here in this video is going to be in no particular order compared to my notes. So we're going to go into Bitcoin. Now, I'm going to have to, make sure I get all the links related to as much of this in the description below, so please be patient. So that's down there. So here's the thing with Bitcoin. Now, it's like when it comes down to varying aspects of cryptocurrency, it's playing a bigger role in the sense of like who gets their hands on graphics cards and what are they using to pay for it. Now, the thing with Bitcoin is that if you look at this chart right here, now this has everything from the launch, which is the 3rd of January 2009. Now you see all the block rewards, all that stuff. So you get so a bit of a numbers game. Now, ever since 2012, this is what's known as a Bitcoin Halving Event, where the block reward is cut in half. So what's going on here is that since 2012, once every 4 years, the Bitcoin block reward is cut in half. So you look at 2016, last year 2020, the next one coming up in 2024, the following one in 2028, and the next one is in 2032. And then you notice here in the block rewards, you see at the start, which was again back in 2009, was at 50, then goes down to half to 25, so on and so forth. And then you notice that the Bitcoin supply in circulation by 2032 is going to be at 99.22%. So it's one of those things where it's like when people, jump on, Bitcoin or whatever cryptocurrency, things get a little interesting. And then when you look at Bitcoin aspects, it's like who's using Bitcoin to pay for what? So when it comes to this particular article where I got the screen cap from, because I just wanted to show the numbers, which again you can see here, I'm gonna zoom it in so that it's a little easier to see for the viewers. So that's the numbers right there, the date, actual and predicted, the block reward, and the Bitcoin supply in circulation. So it's like once every 4 years, give or take, you see a halving event. Now, the following years, and by that, for example, 2017, this year so far, 2025, 2029, and 2033. Now, what do those certain odd numbered years have in common? That means the peak, right after the Bitcoin halving event. Which is the reason why the supply gets really screwed over. Now, for Bitcoin, it's reaching the peak this year, and this is in timing with the ongoing pandemic. I'm going to get into the pandemic in a little bit on this section of the video. Now, with certain sense of like timing of Bitcoin, you know, the peak for this year in conjunction with the pandemic, it's like the shortage is like very, very real. Some people are denying that it's not, the shortage is not there, just people are paying this or that. It's like, that's why I say it's he says, she says. Like, we don't know what's really going on. What we do know is that stuff like this is happening. Now I'm going to put it into this particular screenshot, but another reason, like, for the shortage not going away anytime soon, it involves China. Now, I kind of have this here, but it does serve a purpose. It is, some of this does tie to China's recently passed legislation. Now, what I'm going to describe, I'm going to have an article, I want to say it's Tech Radar. They brought this particular topic up. And once I find this article, it's going to be in the description below. So, what's going on in China in recent times? So they passed some legislation. Some people think it's draconian, which is extreme in simple terms. Is that they passed a couple of laws. You know, one of them very much banned Bitcoin mining, and then another law was passed to shut down supplier locations in China for days at a time per month. So I'm going to have links tied to both items in the description below as well. So the reason why China's, you know, having these new laws in effect, and which is affecting the supply shortage, is that for a couple of things. You have Europe now said to be the epicenter of Bitcoin mining, and then when you're looking at the shutdown of the suppliers for days at a time per month, that means it puts a delay on when things come to varying shores, whether it be American, European, Canadian, or even Australian. So it's one of those things, like, the shortage is going to hit people hard when you look at the suppliers being shut down for days at a time per month. And then, you know, you have Europe supposedly being the epicenter of Bitcoin mining right now. Now, this particular item right here is from the EVGA website. Now, I'm not going to put the EVGA website in the description below, but it's only because for something like this, I'm going to talk about this particular one in a little bit. So I will be returning to this somehow, like I said, because there are some changes here. So what they're kind of saying here initially, and this was like on Monday, that they were going to prioritize those who have yet to get a card for them over those who already bought for them directly. So that's the original update. So there is an update to this. I will get to this in a little bit. Now, this is, in my personal opinion, hinting at the supply chain issue in California. Now, what does this have to do with the shortage problem? It has a lot more to do with it than you think. Now, the reason why I said this has a lot more to do with it than you think is because for people who work in the shipping, receiving, logistics industry like I do, there's a thing known as terms of not hours of service. I was going to say terms of service, it's actually hours of service. Now, the reason why hours of service is extremely important to keep in mind of is that when people transport goods, no matter what it is, there is a limitation of time. Meaning that the exact hours limitations that drivers have to transport goods here in the United States are 14 hours a day and 60 hours per week. And this is to avoid penalties. Now, there are certain circumstances where the hours of service limitations go up to 70 hours, but it's got to get approval ahead of time before it goes into place. Now, again, this is these hour numbers, instead of the how many hours one could work to avoid penalties. This is very well known within my industry. Now, if you look up here, I actually had to do a quote unquote Google search here. These are financial numbers of hours of service violations from the Department of Transportation. Now, these numbers are not one to take lightly. Now, again, this is Department of Transportation. Any company that is tied to transporting goods has to comply with this, because some of these monetary figures are not a laughing matter. Now, like I said before, there are certain exceptions where the hours of service limit goes up to 70 from 60. But again, it has to be approved ahead of time, because otherwise, we're going to be seeing fines of this range. Anywhere to $1,000 United States currency to $16,000 United States. Now, for anything that violates these types of violations, meaning that Department of Transport, hours of service, and the package contains a hazardous material, the fines could exceed 75,000 United States dollars. And for those who are insistent on getting their items, are these monetary numbers really worth it? There's something you have to ask yourself. So this is something one can look up on their own time. These type of numbers, and to get a better understanding of how the shipping, receiving, logistics industry works in accordance with the Department of Transportation, both on the state level and on the federal level. Now, the next thing I kind of want to bring up is the COVID-19 pandemic itself. Now, this is kind of important to take in mind because this does affect a lot of the other reasonings thus far, but it deserves its own section. Now, they're kind of wondering, what does the pandemic have to do with the graphics card shortage? It has a lot more to do with it. Now, a lot more people are working from home. They're using like laptops or wanting something to keep themselves entertained. Now, granted, this does tie into certain aspects of the shipping, receiving, logistics industry, because again, it's a lot more work on us to make sure everybody is either happy and entertained, or alternatively saving lives. Now, if people don't practice the protocols, meaning that social distancing, mask, especially if you're unvaccinated, not washing your hands, stuff like that could prevent you from getting sick with COVID, it's like this pandemic will never end. And more people will die if proper protocols are not being practiced. Regardless if you're working from home or you actually go outside and perform your work there. So it's one of those things, it's like, what's worth it? What is worth waiting? That sort of thing. Now, speaking of a couple of things I brought up thus far, now another topic I want to go into, which is another reason why, is shortages in the overall workforce. Now, we're not just talking the shipping, receiving, and logistics industry. We're talking any industry where there is a shortage. And this does include healthcare. Now, when it comes down to these shortages, and people are still, here in the U.S., are still buying to their heart's content, it's not a good idea, because you have some hospitals here in the U.S. that are at overcapacity. The most notable state in the U.S. that has this issue with hospitals being overcapacity is actually in Idaho, with parts of Alaska, along having those issues as well some of the southern states here in the U.S. And you don't want to overwhelm people to the point where they're forced to go to the hospital, and there's a chance where the hospital may have to turn them down due to the hospital being over capacity. So it's one of those things, it's like, is the graphics card really worth it? Now, another reason why I don't think the shortage is going to go away, involves the United States Postal Service. Now, at the beginning of this month of October is a change in the post office in a sense, and it's pretty big. Now, the first change that the post office has made is the rise in prices of varying services, which includes the cost of stamps. Now, this is kind of important because there is always a possibility of some of the work that the post office handles being shifted to the private sector, which includes UPS, FedEx, DHL, Amazon, and other independent carriers. Can the private sector handle whatever they inherit from the post office? And I said this on TikTok, and I'll say it here. The answer to that question will really heavily depend on the location, because some locations will have adequate staffing, which means they can handle it no problem. Other locations, however, will not have an easy time. And this goes in hand with the Department of Transportation hours of service limitations. So it comes down to that question once again. Is it really worth it? Now I'm going to go on to the continent of Europe. Now, as I said earlier, China very much banned crypto mining altogether. Now, in addition to the environmental aspect law they recently passed in shutting down varying suppliers for days at a time per month, you see the shift in the sense of like where bots or miners will probably be, and some people are saying it's in Europe. Now, the reason why I say this now, believe it or not, is where some of the online sales of graphics cards are going. So it's one of those things where if businesses really don't keep up with like who's really buying these graphics cards, are they being resold, and amongst other things, it's going to be like there's a slim possibility within that it's not being given to the right people for the right reasons. And it's something to completely keep in mind. Now, another reason why I don't think this problem is going to go away is the consumers themselves. We're not talking just those who want to gain. I'm also bringing in those who buy graphics cards to scalp them, miners, as well as those who use bots. The finger point. In as much as I don't want to be the one that says this, we are all equally playing a role in the shortage with the finger pointing. When in reality, we all are playing a part. This is no matter how hard we want to deny it, we are all playing a part in the shortage, and it's in equal weight. Meaning that businesses may have to start changing things in order to get a long-term solution to this. Now, this is one of two articles I'm going to be showing you guys a little bit here. This one is on Best Buy. Now, Best Buy at the beginning of October had the most recent in-person graphics card restock. Now, according to some accounts on Twitter, which I retweeted some of them, is that some of what happened during the most recent restock was, to put it kindly, deplorable. Now, what I'm going to describe is something you might want to grind your teeth to. Now, in one particular video, and again, there's actually two separate ones because there are two different points of view here. So one of them had a patron waiting for a graphics card being inside of a chokehold on and off for about 45 seconds. Now, the reason why I say it's on and off because someone was initially choking him, and then another person, was choking him, and at the end of the video, you could probably see the person was still in the chokehold. The fight got pretty bad. Now, there was one other video that mentioned that had brought to light the security at that particular location, not really treating the people who were in line minding their own business with respect. Now, some of the other posts I've seen on Twitter and YouTube are showcasing some managers not following proper protocol with ticket distributions for graphics cards. They're not, and then the whole dips aspect of how some people were going after their graphics cards, being that the chairs. It's like, I think they were trying to, borrow something from Chicago's playbook. And to be brief with the Chicago's playbook, some of us who have cars here in Chicago, we use chairs to designate our parking spot during the wintertime, especially when it's snowing. So using that type of tactic is not really a good idea when it's still decent outside. But like I said, that's just my opinion. But that does relate to some of what was being reported. Now, again, this is Best Buy, and this is one of their upcoming changes. Now, they're doing something. We're gonna scroll down here. So, looks like they're doing something called Total Tech, which is $200 a year, and this is pretty much what it is. And this is the key perk here, according to this particular link, is that they're going to have hard to find items. Now, according to this particular article, we don't know what exact items will be among the hard to find, but some people are speculating graphics cards, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. And for some, it's a bad thing because it's giving more of an opportunity for bots who use the online system to go after graphics cards. But until we know more of what's exactly going to be the perks, it's going to be up to the individual who catches wind to this. Now, one other article I want to give here, and this aspect right here is going to be one of those where you want to take it with a grain of salt, because I do have an email. I'm not going to show the whole thing with my email address on it, but this right here, this particular article, this is actually has somewhat outdated information, in the sense of when this was originally posted versus the update I'm going to provide. Now, according to this particular article at WCCF Tech, EVGA, which is one of the graphics card vendors, is giving priority in the queue for those who have yet to purchase a graphics card directly from them over those who already have. Now, this is the original version of that change from EVGA. Now, the reason why I say it's the original version because they did some rollbacks on this. Now, some of the rollbacks include the following. Like I said, this is a screenshot. So basically the change they made by EVGA was the queue positioning, who was in line where to get whatever graphics card. It's going to be going back to where it was. Like, if you already purchased something before from them directly and you're already about to be close to getting another one, you're not affected. Now, however, another change here is that they're limiting it to 2. In the sense of how many graphics cards you're in queue for. Now, if you got this email like I did, it's because you're going after 3 or more. Now, according to the YouTuber Classical Technology, it's actually a good strategy to be in the queue for 3 or more graphics cards, so that way you can go after the one that that quote unquote bites first, meaning that you get the notification sooner. So, but like I said, this particular rollback by EVGA, it was actually more mixed on Reddit than before. And by mix, it's a little bit more on the disappointing side based on what I was able to interpret. However, with that being said, with Best Buy Micro Center now, I'm not Best Buy EVGA. I am going to get to Micro Center right now. Now, with Micro Center, they actually admitted it on Instagram earlier this year with some of the changes they made to, one graphics card per household per month. And like I said, they admitted that people are already finding ways around it. And unfortunately, when people are already finding ways around certain things, it's not going to get any better. And in fact, it's going to get a lot worse if people keep on exploiting those workarounds. Now, the final reason, and this is more, actually I wouldn't say this is more just completely personal opinion, is that potential legislation being passed in the future. We're not talking the right now with China. But you have to think about China and their influence on other countries. Will other countries follow their lead? And if they do, will they go after the suppliers? Will they ban Bitcoin mining? Will they ban cryptocurrency? Will they introduce legitimate digital currency? And so you have to think about all of these things. It's like there's always that possibility that I can no longer get as many graphics cards because of new laws. So this is one of those reasonings where it's like it's not part of the now, but it's something that to not be surprised by the future due to potentially people not really talking about it. Now I am going to go straight into my +1 for why the shortage won't go away, and that involves vendors and what they're charging for it. Because if you're constantly going into this where you're selling it for MSRP, it's not good in the long run. Now, the reason why I feel it's not good in the long run to constantly go into this at MSRP is because, again, you got people who buy and then sell to try to make profit off of it. You also attracting too many people, and then you have instances like the most recent graphics card restock at Best Buy locations across the U.S. in person. This is something that any and every vendor plus private business really needs to avoid. Because you have too many repeats of this, and they may have to change things where no one's going to like it. Now, I'll be back with my 10 solutions with that +1. Now I am back. I do have to do a little note taking so that way once I get, ready to post this, I have certain aspects, in order. So for this particular half, it's going to be 10 possible solutions along with the +1 to make the total numbers of things I say here as even as humanely possible. So with the first possible solution is that we may have to reduce how much of whatever we order and be more patient with what we exactly order. The reason why patience is because, again, you have that shortage with the chain supply. You have a shortage in people who are able to transport things from point A to point B in a safe manner. And you have to factor in the DOT, hours of service limits. And with all those factors coming together, is that patience is a virtue, as the saying goes. The more patience we have, the better the results, and the better chance our graphics card is in pristine condition. Now, another solution to this involves the workforce itself, meaning that improvements are made to where there's adequate staffing in more locations and situations than not. Now, the reason why this is important is because with the current shortages in the workforce, things are taking longer than what some people feel needs to be. And this includes something that's unrelated to graphics cards, which is life-saving medicine, documentation that can help, people, get to where they need to be, amongst other things. Now, solution number 3 is that with the vendors, they create new rules to where they're actually bringing in more business, because when it comes down to the realm of favoritism, it's one business practice that's both legal and questionable, because if you're constantly playing favorites by catering to more of your returning customers, you're probably going to be alienating potential new customers, newer revenue, because you can only rely on your loyal customers for so long before there's a potential of a change in the loyal customer situation and you don't have as much money. And businesses may or may not survive because of the favoritism. So it's more like solutions like you have to have a better balance of both keeping your loyal customers but bring in new customers. And unfortunately, some businesses are not doing a good job in that regard. Now, solution number 4, because I went through 3 of them rather quickly. Now, the 4th one involves the pandemic. It's gotta end, because once it ends, we can return to some format of normalcy. Even though that when the time comes the pandemic ends, there's probably going to be some newer rules people are going to have to follow. And this especially applies to private companies because, unfortunately, private companies are exempt from varying things within the Constitution. And that's something people may find hard to believe, but it is fact. So it's one of those things, it's like having patience, doing the right things to end the pandemic ends. We could probably, return to some format of normalcy, and we can, have money to do this or that. Now, the 5th thing I feel that would solve the whole shortage issue is for businesses to tighten the loopholes. Meaning that, like I said a little while ago about Micro Center actually admitting on Instagram that some of their customers have found ways around the whole 1 per person, 1 per address per 30 days. It's like they have to tighten those loopholes because the shortage will never end if those loopholes are not tightened up. And there also has to be some limitations being made by businesses, not just Micro Center, but also Best Buy and anywhere graphics cards are sold in person. Now, the 6th solution comes down to any and every country. And by that, possible legislation. Now, some people are probably going to assume that I'm going to be saying something along the lines of crypto ban mining, but it comes down to, in reality, something about currency. Meaning that they may have to introduce digital currency. And if cryptocurrency gets to be considered legal, that means it's not getting banned, but there are regulations around it to where people know what they have to do in order to avoid varying penalties by their respective country outside of China. Now, additional legislation that they could introduce as well is environmental stuff, meaning that suppliers in their countries to, do something similar to China. But that particular aspect remains to be seen at the moment. But for varying countries, I do feel they should introduce some format of digital currency to be completely legal. And I do feel that cryptocurrency should have some format of regulations and also be considered as legal currency. So, I'm not asking for crypto mining to be banned, but I do ask for some regulation in certain countries alongside cryptocurrency being considered 100% legal. Because some countries may not see it that way, but I would want to see cryptocurrency being 100% legal worldwide. Now, another solution, I could see this helping is that input on the shortage from varying industries that this is affecting. Not just shipping, receiving, logistics, but people from automotive, video gaming, healthcare. Things that have, they are affected by the chip shortage. So, varying input from them, saying how this is affecting them, some insight could reach the right eyes and ears. And when it comes down to being of influence, that could help. Especially when it's being posted on social media. It's a bizarre concept that people may not see right away. but it's something that could help on a long-term scale. And if something like that happens and people are starting to realize, I'm like, okay, this is not as good as we think it is, then things may change for the better. But again, only time will tell. And how serious people may take the message, regardless of who delivers it. Now, for another solution here, comes down to us, the consumers. Now, I have another thing, another solution tied to consumers, but that's going to be a little bit later. Now, this first one for consumers comes down to, regardless of like what we intend to use the graphics card for, whether it be buy it to make profit off of it, or to do crypto mining with it, or to game, or even content creation. Now, the reason why I mention this is because if we all help each other get a graphics card, instead of, just going after one for my friends or one for this person, being more selfish, but instead being selfless, it could get the shortage done a lot faster. But, people being a bit more selfish, this is not going to end. And then we're probably going to be seeing more incidents like the one at Best Buy at the beginning of this month. So it's one of those things they're still hearing these stories, but it's like when people don't really do anything about it, and I have to be honest here, talk becomes cheap. If you don't want to help people, then don't go suggesting, I hope you find this, I hope you find that, blah, blah, blah. Or I'm going to be camping out. It's like, not helping the person is becoming the problem. And for scalpers, this is especially for them. Because you could try, help by selling it for profit, but you're also kind of hogging up the supply. And that is going to put scalpers, like those who see this, it's going to put them in a very, very, very bad light. And I'm just being kind of polite about it. Now, this particular solution is one of those where it's like, it's the second to last of the 10. And it's one of those things where it's like, it's like something I had to really think about a little bit, but in a way it makes sense. So what I'm going to mention here now is, surprisingly, time. Now, if you remember early on in this video, I bring up the Bitcoin Halving Events. Now, I also mentioned in that section where you have look at the years 2025, 2029, 2033. The years expected to have a peak following the Bitcoin halving. Now, the reason why I say time here is that some people could very well speculate that the year 2034 is the magic year where things get to be completely normal, where not only demand meets supply, but the supply is at a reasonable price. Now, keep in mind, some countries use the whole thing known as inflation, meaning that the MSRP we think it should be is lower than what we're seeing on the shelves. So it's one of those things right now it's a really bad time to get a graphics card at MSRP, in my personal opinion. But it's one of those things, we don't know what MSRP is anymore. And in the case of some, myself included, MSRP is dead, as we know it. And as much as I don't want to say MSRP is dead, it actually is. And there are people may be seeing this and seeing me as a pessimist, but it's at the same time, it's you have to do a little bit of research of knowing certain aspects of Bitcoin halving, Department of Transportation stuff, including hours of service limits, and amongst things in that relation. The supply chain shortage too. But having a little time on our hands, in the sense of like knowing when things are supposed to come, it helps people prepare. And having more time to prepare for certain things becomes one's greatest weapon to combat the shortage. Now, the final solution of the 10. Now, this again is the second one for the consumers. Now, this one, however, is one of those things where consumers have to be open to seeking other avenues for a graphics card, because people could be all MSRP or bust or whatever, but sometimes it's just not in our favor. And sometimes people may have to go through a scalper for a graphics card, which is my situation. And unfortunately for my exact situation, I have very limited avenues for a graphics card outside the Newegg Shuffle and the scalper route because of where I work. And like I said, the type of work I do for UPS is, again, responsible for making sure people get their packages delivered, as well as some stuff getting picked up. That's very much my role. And unfortunately, I don't have the avenues that some others do. And people's like, oh, you can use your paid time off, but then again, you have to know my exact situation. It's not the same as yours. And unless somebody knows my exact situation down to the letter, it's one of those things, it's like, is it really worth judging me for? Because if people judge me, based on my situation, that means I reserve the right to judge those people in return. Because if you judge me before you get to know me, you're going to be missing out on a lot. And whatever you judge me for could be very well the wrong things. So it's one of those things, it's like, you got to be very careful there. Because one person's situation will not be the exact same as the second person. Now, for my plus one in the solution, comes down to vendors and private businesses. And this is going to be in the sense of pricing. And what do I mean here? Play fire with fire. Now, what do I mean by this? I'm going to check my time because my phone is a little low on juice, so I just want to explain this as thoroughly as possible before I have to cut off my phone for the night. Now, what I mean by playing fire with fire. Now the fire here I'm going to describe is those who buy graphics cards to scalp and make profit off of. So this is kind of like going into that territory. Now, the territory we're currently seeing with varying vendors is that they're going into it at MSRP. You're opening the door for too many people to go after a graphics card that way, which is a bad idea in itself. Now, the solution by playing fire with fire is for all vendors to raise the prices temporarily to be as close to that of the scalpers as possible. Because if you want to make sure people are able to walk into a Best Buy or a Micro Center for a graphics card or to be able to order it online, is that sometimes MSRP is not a good idea. It's not the way to go. And until people realize that, it's like things will remain the same or even get worse. And vendors have to ask themselves the one question: is it really worth it to keep things at MSRP? Is it worth it? Because if it isn't, then you have to change something. Raise the prices to be close to scalpers, so that way you can have your supply to equal demand. Because if you keep things at or close to MSRP, the shortage will remain. And if you look at years like 2034, which could be a magic year for supply to equal demand, some people will have moved on. And for people to not move on, sometimes businesses have to go to extreme measures. Unless they want to get the government involved, and the government could put in some new rules, like I said earlier, and nobody wins. And this is something that vendors and businesses should very much avoid. And some places like Best Buy, pardon me, Best Buy has ways to make money. They don't have to rely on computer components. Although Micro Center, they don't have as many means to, but they still could do money like that too. So it's one of those things like people really need to stop making excuses. Stop supporting the MSRP thing and prevent, certain people, aka scalpers, from being able to get into line and for businesses to follow proper protocols. So businesses probably going to step up here. And until they do, graphics cards will not have their shortage end in sight. So, to conclude this video, like I said, it is going to be a long one. And the solutions aspect, I will admit, is a bit shorter than the shortage itself. I do feel that unless what I mentioned here in some capacity, it gets picked up by varying people, the shortage will never go away. Because people are humans. And the sad thing is that certain things that come along makes things worse. And you look at the shortage right now, not only with the graphics card supply, but other things tied to it, is that I'm going to try to say this without sounding too wordy, and this is one of those topics that's kind of frustrating for me. But it's one of those things where it's like, we all have got to change. And until we change, everything will remain the same or get worse. I need to get some water, so please forgive me on that. So, with all of that out of the way, my final thoughts on the matter. And the shortage, I think some companies should have planned better. And by the companies, the makers of these graphics cards. As well as places like Best Buy and Micro Center. They should have planned this a lot better, especially when knowing that 2020 was the start of the pandemic, before the vaccines. And a little bit of bad timing caused all of this to happen. But with a little bit of preparation from this, I do hope the shortage is before I do hope that the end of the shortage is before 2034. But with the way things are looking, it doesn't appear to be ending before that. And it's a sad reality. And until we really look into the sad reality of this shortage, I mean, is it really worth getting on those in the shipping, receiving, logistics industry to get the graphics cards out sooner when there are certain things beyond our control? And that's all I really have for tonight. So, with Wolfie here, signing off, I will catch you all on the flip side.